We're very, very lucky today to have Em Campbell-Pretty here with us from Pretty Agile in Melbourne. She is for those who are not aware of who she is a SAFE Fellow and author of two excellent books, which if you haven't read, I'd really recommend you read. They're like Bibles to me. The Art of Avoiding a Train Wreck and Tribal Unity. Really, really excellent resources at the risk of flattering Em before I hand over to her. So she's going to talk about the art of avoiding a train wreck. So I will hand over to Em now. No doubt there will be questions that arise throughout the talk, but if you can either hold them to the end or just put them in the notes, and we'll refer to them when Em has finished her presentation. And there should be plenty of time at the end of the session for Em to answer your questions. Is that good with everyone? Great. Em, thank you very much, and over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Russell, for inviting me to come along. So as promised, I'm going to talk about the art of avoiding a train wreck. I have dragged along with me this morning or this afternoon or wherever in the world you are, I guess that depends, Adrienne Wilson, who is the co-author of the Art of Avoiding a Train Wreck. Initially, she had something on today and now she doesn't. So I said, you can come and hang out with us and talk about train wrecks if you like. As Russell said, we'll take questions at the end, mainly because the last time I did this, which was only a few weeks ago, I told everyone I'd take questions as we go. And I got absolutely bombarded with questions and it just turned into an absolute train wreck. So new approach. We'll share some thoughts with you, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. This is actually the session we did at the European Safe Summit in June, I'm going to say, somewhere around there. And it was about a 30-minute, give or take, presentation at the time. But certainly feel free to drop questions in the chat or hold them for later. But we will ignore the chat until we get there. If there is something urgent or pertinent, we don't mind the interruption, but yeah, lots of questions results in this just going a little bit pear-shaped. What else do I need to tell you? I don't know, nothing, I don't think. That's sharing, okay, yeah. Awesome. Okay, probably the only other thing I should mention is Adrienne and I are actually co-located, so you will see that she has mad skills and she can talk on mute. Would you like to demonstrate your mad skills, Adrienne?
I have so many mad skills. I didn't think that talking on mute was one of them, but we'll take it. Happy New Year, everybody.
Awesome. All right. So, the art of avoiding a train wreck. I like to think the first step is to actually just work out where you are, based on your metrics before you start. It's one of those things that nobody thinks about, nobody stops to do, and it doesn't really matter until you're 6 months into things and somebody turns around and says, so, how's it going? You go, excellent. And they go, proof. And you go, doesn't it look excellent to you? It looks excellent to me. I mean, aren't we having fun? Aren't we delivering stuff? Isn't this great? And that goes okay until you talk to the finance people who go, no, seriously, show me the money. But it's really hard to do if you haven't actually worked out where you're at. I don't think this has to be rocket science. I think just getting an idea of where you're at, particularly on the things that you're hoping to move by moving your world to safe and launching this agile release train. So some of our favorites are things like employee net promoter score. Would you recommend working here to a friend or colleague? Net promoter score for stakeholders or customers. Would you recommend our products or services, or would you recommend the delivery services of this agile release train or soon to be agile release train? Cycle time, quality metrics like escaped defects, something along those lines, frequency of deploy, are all really, really good things to look at. So it's one of those things that is really hard to do, but certainly will help you in due course being able to tell a story about the journey you have been on. So if you understand where you're at and choose a train, right? So that's the next thing we need to do. Where is this agile release train? Russell and I were chatting just as you guys were joining about New Zealand and the size of the New Zealand and the size of the organisations. Perhaps in New Zealand you don't need to choose a train. You just go, there is a train because the organisations, train sized in its entirety. But bigger organisations, maybe you need to choose a train. There's a raft of guidance on this, and Scaled Agile has a workshop that's designed to help you do this. Your ideal agile release train is what we would call value stream aligned, so it's aligned to the products and services that your organization sells or delivers to its customers or the market. If I had a piece of advice here, I think it's got to be choose the train that you can, as I like to say, wrap your arms around. So there's the perfect train, and then there's a train that you have the political clout or backing to launch. And the train that you have the political clout and backing to launch will always do better than the one that you don't. I can be really pragmatic about this. Any group of people, really from somewhere around 30, 35 people through to 100 plus, who have a reason to work together will probably get value out of this. Noting there has to be that reason to work together, right? So grabbing 5 independent project teams who have no need to ever talk to each other and then forcing them to be an agile release train is not what I mean. There has to be some reason to work together, whether it's a shared technology, shared customer base, shared program of work, or your ideal, everybody working on product development or solution development for a given product solution value stream. So we know where we are and we've picked a train. I always say there are four ingredients to a successful agile release train launch: leadership, ready features, real agile teams, and the knowledge with which to execute. So starting with this leadership conversation, and a little bit back to that theme about the train for which you have the political cover or support to launch. Get your ducks in a row, which means get the leaders aligned. So your ideal agile release train will probably cross some organizational silos. But if the leaders of those silos are not bought in to having people be part of the train, then they'll likely play along until the very last minute when they actually have to stump up some people to participate, at which point they'll decide they don't want to play anymore. And the people will evaporate and you will have half an agile release train. I've seen this over and over again. Anywhere that there is an organization, bunch of existing silos, one of these leaders says, I want to launch a train. A perfect train is mapped out and it includes people from other departments, but nobody lines up the leaders from the other departments. So you've got to have that buy-in of everybody you want to participate. If you don't have the leadership buy-in, those people will be pulled away from what you're doing. And once you have that group of leaders, and one of the ways you can get that group of leaders aligned, of course, is leading SAFe. And yes, it's motherhood and apple pie, and it's what we do in SAFe, but it's also interesting, right? So I've been doing this for 10 years now. One of the most frequent questions I get asked is, how do you get leadership on board? And the answer is always the same. Have they been through leading SAFe? No. And I'm like, well, you got to start with education, right? How do you get them on board to something that they don't understand and they don't appreciate? Love the quote here from Deming: experience by itself teaches nothing. Without theory, experience has no meaning. Without theory, no one has questions to ask. Without theory, there is no learning. I can tell you that when we get leaders to spend the 2 days with us, taking leading safe, it's got to be 99 times out of 100 that organisation agile release. And I'm not saying it's perfect, and I'm not saying those leaders are perfect, but gee, a baseline understanding of what we're trying to do goes a really long way. We have a bit of a saying in our world when leaders tell us they don't have time, which is, we believe if you have an organization that you're going to ask to change, you have a moral obligation to understand what it is you're asking your organization to do. It's that simple. I want 2 days of your time to inform you about the change that you're about to inflict upon the people who work for you. I don't think that's an unreasonable ask. And in fact, in our world, we don't work with organizations that will not at least take that time. Leadership, of course, is a team sport. Well, agile leadership is a team sport. So it's about having the leaders come together as a team. So we don't want some leader off by themselves. We want a group of leaders leading this art launch. And these are the people who are going to help the organisation prepare. These are the people who are going to lead that preparation effort. At a minimum, I would expect that art leadership to include the release train engineer, product management, system architect, often known as the trifecta or power of three, the troika, Holy Trinity, you name it, those three key roles. And often there's an extended leadership group, whether that is some of the line managers, maybe development managers from around the organization. And they need to behave as a team. And we have that team come together and lead by example. So plan the launch of the Agile release train in a way similar to the way the team would plan for their first PI, and then execute that plan in an agile fashion, including the daily stand-up and the visualization of the work. And you can see here, these folks have got about a PI plan worth of plannings, a group of leaders on a client site. We've got them doing a fist of 5 to sign up to the plan, and then that same plan is being burnt down every day with the leaders coming together and talking about the progress they're making towards getting that train ready for launch. Quick tip, I've got to tell you, leaders make the worst agile team members. So you will want to appoint someone as the Scrum Master or someone have act in that role. Often it ends up being the Agile coach or a safe program consultant. In this case here, it's the Agile coach getting that team moving along. So the second ingredient here is ready features. For the longest time, I was convinced that PI planning was completely idiot-proof. Yeah, not so much. It kind of should be, from the perspective that if you're doing a very textbook safe launch, you're going to have taken people through the approach through a simulation in one of the classes before they do it. Hopefully you've got an SPC on site who has access to a bunch of tools from Scaled Agile, including a facilitation guide. I mean, yeah, there's a stock standard agenda. There's a bunch of instructions around what you do at every step. It really should work well. However, as it turns out, you can break this thing. And the way you do that is you don't have any features for the teams to work on at PI planning. I know of 3 or 4 instances over the 10 years I've been involved with this of various crashing and burning of PI planning events caused by lack of features. I think my favorite is the organization that I got just a phone call. Can you come in and help with PI planning? They were they had someone a colleague working with them. They knew that the features were what we might call underbaked. I was told not to worry about it. The plan was that there would be someone on site who was a product manager who knew about the features, and that person would work with the team and it would work itself out. This was a 2-site PI planning event. My colleague was on the other site. We get through the morning briefings. We get to the point that the teams have to start working on the features. And I've gone and found my product manager, and I've said, I believe you can share some detail around the features with the team. And I kid you not, he opens with, there's this guy, his name's Steve, and he knows all about this. Where's Steve? He's in Brisbane. We're in Melbourne. Okay, fine. Can someone get Steve on the phone? Oh no, he's on a workshop in Adelaide today. Right. Anyone got an alternative plan? We went home. We didn't do day 2 of planning. And it tends to be how that goes. So if something is going to go catastrophically wrong at PI planning, it is almost always going to be something to do with no features or completely underbaked features. So how do we prepare against this? We prepare features for PI planning, and we use a definition of ready that gives us the ability to decide how we're going to do that up front and how we're going to do it ongoing. So this is a little bit of a taste of what a definition of ready might look like in a given context, a description, benefit hypothesis, and acceptance criteria, high-level solution, right? An architect's drawn a box and some lines on a page. Obvious dependencies, a high-level estimate. How does this feature relate to other features and other trains? Who are the subject matter experts? You might note here, it doesn't say we wrote all the user stories. That's not the level of detail we're looking for here. I always talk about this as a container, right? What is the container? What is the description of the thing, the acceptance criteria, gives us some boundaries, and who are the people we need to invite to PI planning so that we can have a meaningful conversation about what it might mean to implement this thing. This definition of ready can then be built into a system that allows you to rinse and repeat getting ready for every PI into the future. It takes us about a day to build one of these with an organization. We have an example here that is an interlocking Kanban system between epics and features, and each of these states has a bunch of exit criteria listed below them. And these are all the things we need to do to get ourselves ready to have a backlog of prioritized features ready for PI planning. And we can, of course, visualize this on a lovely big wall. Well, at least actually in New Zealand, you can still do this, right? So this should work perfectly for you. For the rest of the world, everyone gets very upset about the big walls and what are we supposed to do now? But in New Zealand, this should be fine. But Mural or whatever visualization tool works too. Visualize. We like walls because walls are information radiators, right? We call tooling information refrigerators because you can only see what's going on when you open the door and the light goes on. But you can see the work, you can see where it's at, you can move it through the system, and at any point in time, you can see how ready you are for PI planning. So, for example, this wall here, this is where the ready for PI planning stack is. They've just exited PI planning, so there's actually nothing in there right now. But if this was, 2 minutes to PI planning, that big empty column there would be a cause for panic. and that visualization will hopefully spur some folks into action about preparing for PI planning. Adrienne, do you want to pick up a couple of these?
Sure.
You take over the share?
I will take over. One moment, please. There we go. Okay. All right. So real agile teams. That's kind of where the magic is, right? Whenever you're building products and services, this is the core of where all the magic happens. And we're really deliberate in our approach of how we launch trains, how we construct teams, how we coach them. One of the reasons is that we pay particular detail to some studies from a Harvard professor. He said, Hackman was his name, he said 30% of a team's effectiveness for the life of the team is based on how it's launched. So if you think about, you could be deliberate about how you construct your teams and how you launch teams, or it can be kind of haphazard. We like to be on the more deliberate side. And as an organization, we're the culture first approach to transformations. So if you've read a little bit of Tribal Unity, some of the stuff that we're going to highlight here comes directly out of Tribal Unity, and we pull that thread into the art of avoiding a train wreck. But it starts with this wonderful little construct, the actual teams themselves. So we like the SCUM guidance around team size. That 7 people plus or minus 2 makes a lot of sense to us. And the science behind it is around the lines of communication. So if you look here at 9 folks, that's 36 lines of communication between that team. You start getting up into 14, 15 person teams. How many people have been on those teams? Those really big project teams? I know you're out there. Yeah, there you go. A couple of folks raising your hands. It's you can think about the team dynamic, right? It's painful. It's painful. If you have if you're trying to have a morning stand up with 14, 15 people in the room, gosh, it's just painful. So, and smaller teams can execute more quickly because of those lines of communication. It is easier for the team to stay together and stay in alignment. And in alignment is one of the 4 core values of SAFe. So we're deliberate about team size. Organizations be like, well, maybe we'll just do 10, or maybe we'll just do 11. It's like, that's only 2 more people, except at 11 people, you're at 55 lines of communication. So it starts to get kind of almost exponential, the number of lines of communication that you add in the team as you just add 1 single person. So small teams. Then we have, we took a construct out of a Kiwi's playbook, Sandy Mamoli, just one of your countrymen. She and David wrote this really great book of self-selection. It's very small, very approachable. And self-selection kind of sounds like what it is, where people get to self-select into a team. And organizations, they kind of ask us, they say, well, wait a minute, it's like we're going to let our people choose who they want to work with, and we're like, yeah. It's like, well, but what if they choose to work with their friends? Well, I don't know, doesn't that sound like kind of a great thing? I mean, gosh, would it be horrible if people worked with their friends? I mean, how awful would that be, to get to come to work in the morning and work with your friends? I mean, that's just crazy talk. That's crazy talk. So yes, we say for organizations that go on this journey with us, we invite them to do self-selection. This is not self-selection with no rules, because if you're going to have 9 people on a team, there's some general roles you're going to have, right? You're going to have a product owner, you're going to have a scrum master. And then we want to be deliberate about the construct of the team, of what skill sets are in the teams, and whether we're going to be cross-functional teams or component teams or some combination of both. Our bias is always to cross-functional teams. And we create a workshop day to allow the folks who are going to be on the Agile release train to self-select into their teams. Because we like this quote from Sandy and David: a facilitated process of letting people self-organize into small cross-functional teams based on the belief that people are at their happiest and most productive if they can choose what they work on and who they work with. So now we've got at least some framework and some structure. So to get to the place of understanding what that framework and structure is, we design the Agile Release Train. This is about a half day or maybe a day to work with an organization and just understand what's the framework, what's the four corners of the train design. And not surprising, we go back to our friends, the post-it notes in a wall. Here we're using some really big index cards, and this works just fine in an electronic distributed world with Mural or Miro or whatever your favorite online tool is. But you can kind of just see up here, we have down the side here of all of the roles that the team would need to be cross-functional given the construct or in the context of the particular organization. So at the top here, product owner and scrum master, and maybe a tech lead. And then all of these other roles are really specific to that particular context. And then across the top here are the teams. So we take all the names and we say, okay, well, what would a construct might look like, just so that we can have a chance to look at it maybe before self-selection, or maybe we don't get to do self-selection for a particular organization. So then we start to play Tetris and put people into the teams. And we can use color to help us see some very particular information. Sometimes the color is for, are they full-time employees? Are they contractors? We might sometimes use color for geographical location so that we understand when we build a team, do we have a team that's partly in Australia, partly in New Zealand, or Australia and India? We did this with one organization where we used color to understand who are the full-time employees and who were the contractors. And it turned out that the organization knew that they had outsourced all of their development activities, but when we created this view of using these colored post-it notes, and the entire train was contractors, it was really quite eye-opening for the organization to realize what they had done is that the entire infrastructure and their know-how of development had been completely outsourced. So it kind of was that light bulb of, oh, that realization. So you can see how well you construct your teams, how much internal knowledge do you still have inside the organization, how many time zones are you putting inside a single team, because that doesn't necessarily feel quite good for teams when you're trying to team with someone that you never get to see, because the time zones are so disparate that the team itself can't actually come together and team. That's part of the part of being deliberate about how we construct our teams and making them cross-functional, and seeing some of those considerations of contractor, full-time, where are they located in the world. Color is a great way to help you see some of those different aspects of a team. So let's just kind of review. We've had leadership. We've had some leadership training. We've had some. We've constructed an Agile Release Train. We have a way to create some features. Now let's talk about getting a little bit closer to an actual train launch, and what's the next best thing to go do. And this is the knowledge with which to execute. Inside SAFe, there used to be this slide. It was called, and it was this slide, and it's the most simplistic guidance, but so remarkably powerful. And people, some organizations have ignored it. And when Em was talking to you earlier, like that moral obligation to train everyone, we really believe that. And the guidance is really simple. Train everyone that's going to be on the train, and then launch the train. Train everyone, launch trains. It sounds easy. It sounds easy, but it's the most skipped step. When we come in to diagnose a train wreck inside an organization, we'd have to say this is probably the #1 cause of train wrecks. So the conversation might go like this. We get invited into an organization, we get invited and we start chatting with some folks, and we say, hey, we'd love to go talk with your teams. They're like, great, no problem. And they're always downstairs. I mean, the executive team, they're kind of up here. The teams are always downstairs in the bowels of an organization somewhere. So we go down into the basement, and there's no light down there, and there's the teams, being mushrooms, and we ask them, so what's going on with you guys? Like, did you get trained? And they're like, yeah, no, not really. Some key leaders did. Some key leaders got trained, but we didn't. So we go back and we talk to the leaders and we say, okay, so wait a minute. 50 to 125 people, new way of working. You put them in an agile release train. You ask them to work in a new way, think in a new way, and you didn't give them any training. What did you think was going to happen? Nothing good. Nothing good comes out of this. So we're really clear when we work with organizations, it's the moral obligation of the leadership that if you're going to ask up to 125 people to think and work in a new way, the least thing you could do is train them. So once we've kind of gone over that hurdle of, okay, at least we're going to train them. Some of the things that we've heard is, well, okay, well, maybe you don't need to train them because, well, my teams are already agile. Or, but I don't have the budget to train everybody. Or you mean everyone except the vendor teams and the contractors, right? Because those aren't real people, because they're not our people, those other people, right? They're not real people. It's like we don't need to train them. It's like, no. Moral obligation. Remember, 30% of a team's effectiveness for the life of the team is based on how it's launched. And the first step is that training step. So even if you have those contractors that are embedded into the full-time employee teams, they're still part of that team. So it behooves organizations to say, let's just, even though our teams may be agile and maybe we're agile awesome, and lots of organizations have a very strong belief that they're agile awesome, you're starting a new way of working. We're creating this new construct. The best thing we can do is just level set everybody and give everyone the understanding of not only safer of Scrum, but also how SAFe works and how agile release trains work. So it's really a non-negotiable for us. If leadership isn't going to take training, if they're not willing to train the teams and launch the train appropriately, then we're not, as an organization, we're not excited about engaging. So we have a very particular pattern. If you've read Avoiding a Train Wreck, then, or if you've read any of Em's blog posts in the past about Quick Start, this was originally part of SAFe guidance, and Em and I have both had the experience of launching trains without doing Quick Start, and then doing Quick Start for the first time and going and seeing the power of the Quick Start and never going back. This might sound kind of crazy when we walk through it, but it is so remarkably powerful. We look at this now as a 7-day approach. So we're going to take the Scrum Masters offline right before we launch this train, the full week of train launch, and we're going to give them some training. This is just-in-time training to level set them on, here's some Scrum Mastery context for you. Then we roll into launch week, and this is where the magic happens. So we create this very first day of team formation. So this is where we put the self-selection workshop. We create a really fun workshop called Team Product Box, where the teams create a product box that describes them and they introduce themselves to their train. And we create some time for the team to gel and create some working agreements. This is all about taking the time to be deliberate about launching the teams and the train, going back to that 30% effectiveness metric. Then we roll right into team training, and that course in SAFe Construct is the SAFe for Teams. And the power of this is you've got everyone who's on the train together being trained all at the same time. So all of the questions that get asked get answered from the same instructors with the same messaging, all at the same time. But once we complete that, we roll right into PI planning. And it's the standard 2-day PI planning event where the teams plan out that kind of mid-range planning for the next 8, 10, or 12 weeks of work. And that's our quick start pattern. The power of this event is whatever the organization was doing beforehand, whether you're coming from waterfall or ad hoc agile or whatever the case may be, you were what you were before. We go through this quick start approach, and then we drop you immediately back into you are now launched and you're working in safe. So it's like a light switch. You were what you were yesterday, flip the switch, you've had the training, you've gone through PI planning, and it's day one, sprint one, coming on the next Monday. It is remarkably powerful. So I think it's also probably because that training is right in time with actually using it. It's not people get trained and then 3 weeks later they actually get to use it. It's there's zero time between training and using. So it's a very, very powerful approach. All right, we have some other really fantastic turn up the good patterns. I'm gonna let Em talk to you about turn up the good.
So folks, we might have a train launched, but a train launch does not mean that we are not going to train wreck. So some of the things that we like to do to keep that train on the tracks, we call it the turn up the good patterns. This phrase is stolen, borrowed from Woody Zull, who is one of the thought leaders behind mob programming. And Woody has this theory that we spend too much time focusing on the bad and how to fix it. And instead, we should focus on what is working well and how can we do more of that. So some of the things that we think work in safe, but we like to turn up the good on, focus more on. So one is the innovation and planning iteration. So innovation and planning iteration, the 2-week time box at the end of the program increment, where we have time to prepare for PI planning, where we have time for innovation, and where we do the planning for, we do the inspect and adapt, and we do the planning for the next PI. So a couple of things that we like to do to turn up the good is allocate capacity to feature readiness and to innovation every iteration. So that teams are always spending 10% rule of thumb, and organizations will adjust anything from 5 to 20% depending on their context, but some percentage of a team's time every iteration spent on what we term discovery, which is that preparing features for and preparing for next PI. And instead of just innovation at the end of every PI, we put a little bit of space into every iteration for teams to focus on innovation and improvement, right? We bundle those things together. Another turn up the good pattern relates to art sync. So art sync in safe is a combination of a scrum master, a scrum of scrums, and a product owner sync. And it's generally once a week for half an hour to an hour. So we prefer something I like to call cocktail hour. The idea is borrowed from Henrik Nieberg, his book Lean from the Trenches, in which he talks about a daily cocktail party. But it's basically a series of cascading stand-ups every single day. So in this example here, the organization's leadership has a quick sync first thing in the morning. The teams will do their regular stand-ups, and what you would refer to as art sync in safe is happening at the half hour here for 15 minutes every day. And if you look at that image there, you'll see, there's a whole bunch of people. It's all the scrum masters, it's the product owners, it's the trifecta, it was tech leads, and anybody else interested. I call this the heartbeat of the Agile release train. And the parts of the train that are more support roles will often have their sync afterwards. So for example, there's a system team here, listening to challenges the team was talking about, and then rolling that into their priorities for the day. So anyway, in terms of art sync, instead of an hour once a week, 15 minutes every day as part of a cascading set of stand-ups that we call cocktail hour. Another turn up the good pattern is looking at inspect and adapt. So at the end of every program increment, we reflect on how we are working as a team of teams and the opportunities to improve. Bubble up is every sprint, let's have a look, every iteration, let's have a look at what's going on across the train. It's not the same level of deep dive and half a day of problem solving that you get from inspect and adapt, but it is making sure that we're not sitting on everything until the end of the program increment. So at the following retrospective on day 10 of the iteration, we ask every team to bring problems outside their control or outside their influence to the leadership team. And we start to build up a list of problems that hopefully we can burn down. The teams actually start to help each other as one team raises an issue and another says, oh yes, I've solved that, I'll come help you with it. And worst case, we've built a backlog of things we can take into inspect and adapt at the end of the program increment. Final turn up the good plan pattern for today is turning up the good in PI planning. So if it's good to bring the entire arc together at the beginning of every program increment, how about we bring the entire arc together at the beginning of every iteration? And we call this Unity Hour. So this is bringing literally the entire train together for an hour. So you can see here a bunch of learning activities and agile games. It can be sharing of information. It can be sharing donuts, having coffee. But if you think about the power you get from PI planning, you bring all those people together and they bond. How about you just invest an hour every 2 weeks in people getting to know other people? This will pay off in spades as people start to know all their colleagues to the point that they have a comfort around going and asking others for help and collaborating more in the way that they work. Plus, it's just fun. So, if there was a moral to this story, it is quite simply that it's all about the people. If there's one thing that we truly believe, it's the art of avoiding a train wreck is the discipline of keeping people front of mind. Keep respect for people front of mind in your decision making. Can't go wrong. Thanks very much for tuning in, folks. And on if you liked our stories, as Russell said, there's a couple of books that you can pick up from Amazon. If you'd like to stay in touch, our details are there. Twitter, LinkedIn, email, what have you. And happy to take questions, folks.
Can I kick off?
Certainly can.
Oh, cool. I got a question for Adrienne. You mentioned something called Agile Awesome in a sort of a disparaging way, as it sounded like some sort of pattern that you're aware of. I'm not familiar with it. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Oh, so when we meet organizations and it's in the context of, hey, do we need to train our teams? And some organizations have they've been working in some level of Scrum or Kanban or whatever the case may be, and the desire of the organization is that we're good. There's no need for training because there's nothing for us to learn. We've mastered agility. We are agile awesome. And I think we'd like to hold a mirror up to an organization and say, gosh, lean and agile thinking suggests continuous improvement and a journey of lifelong learning. And I don't know that we've ever met an organization that is so agile awesome that there isn't room for improvement or for level up training. And most organizations don't take the approach of just doing that all in training, making sure everyone has been trained. And so that's our perspective is, I think that many organizations have a blind spot here, and taking the time to allow folks to be trained, to re-energize, to sharpen the skills, sharpen the saw, using one of Covey's taglines, if you will, is kind of the message that we'd like to try and bring to an organization is take the opportunity to level up, to sharpen that skill.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a question, if that's okay.
Yes.
Wondering if you had any direction to places that might have practical tips and tricks for, I guess, the formation of the shared services chunk of things. So we've got a pretty large IT organization supporting a pretty large New Zealand organization here. And we are, I guess, going through the business transformation around getting the business formed up into, you know, their themes and you know, getting their stuff actually going and working together. But the constraint, I guess, at the moment is the way that technology ends up breaking out into support teams that, so some areas are really, really logically able to break out into the trains and be very focused on the parts of the business that they need to focus on, but others are incredibly shared services based. And there's very little that I've been able to find anywhere around guidance on the practical aspects of shared services in a solution train sort of style, lots and lots of trains working together. So we kind of get stuck in breaking everything out.
Yeah.
Well,
So it's kind of where I got started with this. My first train was the Enterprise Data Warehouse at a very large telco. So it meant that absolutely everything in the organization touched us. We were not split up into the organization. We were contained as a single entity. And it's not an uncommon pattern, right? Whether it's an enterprise data warehouse or an ERP or what have you, there are often parts of organizations that, for whatever reason, serve the other parts of the organization and stay as its own entity, as a train, right? You still operate as a train. The trick, I would say, is in how you build what we call our pipeline processes. So going back to where I was talking about, oh my goodness, what was here? Oh no, we have a delay today, which means it takes a moment for things to refresh. Come on. Here and here. This is where I solve for this. I have an intake process for that part of the organization that helps us do all the things that we need to do in terms of how do we prioritize across our broad stakeholder base, how do we tell the rest of the organization what we need to be able to answer the questions they have on us around interdependencies and what have you. So we would spend, I said, a day like this for any train, but for a shared services train, it's a bit of a different conversation because we're trying to think about how you interact with the rest of the organization. I think you're right. I don't think there's anything particularly written on it. There is a bunch of stuff in The Art of Avoiding a Train Wreck, which talks about working with SAFE in a project-driven paradigm that also relates to this style of working. But much of the challenge is in how you intake work and how you collaborate with those who are around you. I don't know that's an attempt at answering your question, Chris.
yeah, I guess, yeah, we're sort of sitting at the 300 epics level, and yeah, where we actually, the technology space actually ends up only having capacity for being able to actually only work on 80 of those 300 things that are all expected to be in flight and are all, driven by pretty high expectations and things.
Mm.
It's just trying to actually find a that useful guidance around that. So yeah, look forward to reading the book.
Yeah, it is a change of conversation. I don't know your organisation at all, obviously, but one of the funny observations I've had over the years is often the thing that is missing for organisations, believe it or not, is some sort of PMO process, and not in a traditional sense, but in a sense that we can better balance demand and supply in a lean and agile manner. And it is a whole bunch of mindset shifts required for the organization when it's going down this path of, we have 300 demands on an 80 capacity for 80. Well, there's no magic there, right, other than understanding the true capacity of the organization and finding tools that help you prioritize and make the capacity.
Cool, thank you.
No worries.
We have 5 minutes left. Any more questions? Come on, people.
Well, if nobody else does, I've got a second one around multi-site planning.
Yeah.
Sure. I will ask my question after Chris. That's all good.
Nope, you're all good, Sarah. Go for it. I had a big chunk of time.
All right. Okay. Thank you. My question is more around the social side of things and for instance, Unity time. Often when people are busy, the thing that slips is hanging out and getting to know each other better. On the one hand, you want it to be fun. You want to draw people in. You don't want to say, have some mandatory fun. But yeah, I guess from what you've seen in your experience, what are some ways that you've seen, I guess, appetite for this kind of thing be lifted?
So strange you should mention mandatory fun. That is often where this starts. When I first started doing this was not a. In fact, it's never a negotiation, right? It's not a trade-off. This is work time, and the activity we're doing during this 1 hour every 2 weeks is spending time together. I can remember I had a big space a few floors up, and I'd send the scrum masters downstairs to our floor to get all the developers that were too important to join us to stop coding and come upstairs. So it's interesting, and I think I talk about it in one of the books. The servant leadership, awesome, all of that, awesome, and then sometimes the right thing for the leader to do is to say, this is not a discussion. And for me, Unity Hour is not a discussion. This is not an optional activity. This is what we're doing. We're going to spend time together. It's not that you have to play games, do silly things. I don't care about that bit. I care that everybody turns up. And if you want to sit out because you don't like to play games, I don't care. I'm not going to force you to do something you don't want to do, but I am going to say this is what we're doing with this time. And there's certainly a lot of it's just about social and fun, but some of it would also be important messages, right? Because it would be an opportunity to have everybody together. So if there was something we needed to share, it was the 5 minutes with which to share it. A lovely guy on a train a year or two ago who asked his scrum masters, I think, should they do Unity Hour or not? And he gave them the vote, and they voted no, so he didn't do it. Like, no, this is not a vote. It flips, right? You do it for 3 to 6 months, and it never becomes a debate again. But it does often become a leadership decision to make it happen in the first place.
Cool. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Chris, did you want to ask your other question?
I was just going to wonder if there were any key tips and tricks that you might have around distributed planning.
So probably the big one at the moment is either all online or all in person. So hybrid planning is horrible. 3 people online and 3 people in a room and somebody drawing on a whiteboard with their back facing the camera. Just don't do it. At the very least, a team is all online or physically in a spot, whatever that spot is. You know, anything that is across multiple locations, you want to reduce the locations as much as you can. So if I was to look at, you know, most of the time in Australia and most of the time in the US, people come together to one place. Internationally, less so, right? So we run a lot of, you know, Sydney, India, Melbourne, China, done Auckland, India, what have you, right? But ideally you get to 2 locations. So even with India, often it's kind of funny actually. You work with organisations and they'll say we have a team in India, and we go, where is that team in India? Well, it's in Pune, Bangalore, Hyderabad. Right. So you have several teams in several cities in India. You know, it's kind of a big place, folks. So we'll bring all those folks to one site in India and one site in Australia as an example. So reduce the amount of sites. You need facilitators at every site because you just do. Check the audio, check the video, check it again, and have a contingency plan because it is 100% going to fail every single time, guaranteed it will fail. So what are you going to do when it fails?
I got one.
Yeah.
No second-class citizens. No second-class citizens. So organizations that Australia, India, New Zealand, India, the Indian folks or the offshore folks or the contractor folks, because they're in a different time zone, it's very tempting to run PI planning based on the core businesses' time zones. And that doesn't feel good, right? Culturally speaking, that doesn't feel good, especially if you've got someone who's trying to plan at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, right? You're not going to get a good plan out of those people. So we say no second-class citizens, which means when we launched a train that was based out of Sydney and in India, the many locations in India, we had folks co-locate in India. We delayed the start in Sydney so that India could actually wake up and come online a little bit. So Em and I were in India, in Pune at 6 o'clock in the morning, starting planning.
5:30, I think, but anyway.
Yeah,
yes.
5:36. It was crazy in the morning. So it's and then in the matching time zone was about 11 o'clock in Sydney. So Sydney stayed later, but we were done earlier in the day. So that's the no second-class citizens. Everybody needs to feel a little bit of pain, if you will, if you have that kind of problem.
So we also had Auckland, India recently, which was basically 3 6-hour days, some later evenings in Auckland and some early mornings in India.
Okay, I think that's a nice natural place for us to wind it up, unless anybody's head is on fire and really wants to ask something.
Aaron put his hand up, which was really polite of him. I feel like I should let him, you know, just ask his question because he was so polite.
Nice.
Well,
as
one question, if you don't mind, I can just, we talked about the train. I mean, I guess that train is one thing. What about the larger ecosystem as an organization, how that is going to support the train? I guess you need an organization that supports the train, isn't it? That's going to take a lot of time. To what extent they need to be prepared as well so that you have a very successful train?
I'm going to call that one a little bit off topic for today, if that's okay. I think that's a much bigger conversation, and today's conversation was very much around the Agile release train. And I did want to give Aaron an opportunity to ask his question, because he's been waiting very patiently before we wrap up. But sure. I think if you want to look at the broader organisation, there's a little bit in the art of avoiding a train wreck, but there's, you know, primarily that is a book about trains as well. But yeah, it's a much bigger conversation than I think we have time for with what we have left today. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Cool. Aaron, you want to get there?
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you so much. How have you seen the challenges with either turnover and or different leveling on teams? You know, so in essence, how to create sort of team leveling. It's been a struggle I've had over time where you kind of get a team that gets kind of dialed in than the team that just isn't, you know, and you don't have promotion relegation. So you're
Yeah.
sort of, you know, does that make
Uh,
sense?
Yeah, it does. I think it's sort of, I don't know that there's an easy answer. Obviously, you know, stable teams are a big part of this. Self-selection is actually really quite awesome for getting people to form teams that are fairly rock solid from the outset, because they've opted in to work with those people. We don't get a lot of turnover on our trains, but we obviously have a massive investment in social infrastructure. I think probably the other observation we'd make is organisations that don't invest in Scrum Mastery often have issues with teams. So, you know, if you think about role of Scrum Master is build the team, right? And if it's nobody's job to build the team, you know, maybe the team gels and they're awesome, and maybe they don't. But I think probably one of the really common patterns we've seen over the years has been the team doesn't have a Scrum Master, and it just struggles to lift. Probably final thought is, you know, if I had major imbalance, and it hasn't happened often, but sometimes we throw all the cards up in the air, we might redo the self-selection or something like that, just try to balance things out a bit. And we'll ask people to help us with that. We'll actually have a train conversation that says we feel imbalanced, and how about we try and share the love a little bit.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for the presentation.
No worries.
Okay. Well, thank you, Em and Adrienne, very, very much for dialing in and talking to us. Thank you, everybody, for coming and attending. Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Everybody else is muted, so I'm just clapping for myself. It's kind of embarrassing. I feel like a performing seal, but so the session's been recorded, and so as soon as it's available, I'll post it on the Meetup. And yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody again, and I hope your year goes very well. And for those of you who are members of the Meetup group, I'll if you have a topic that you're interested in, or if you're interested in presenting or talking or discussing anything, please reach out to me, and I will set up something for a month's time. Thanks for having us, Russell, and everybody in Wellington, and the few locals who joined from this part of the world. And maybe we'll do it again sometime, Russell. Oh, we feel so honoured to have you both. So thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Em. Thanks, Adrienne. Thanks, Russell.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for your question.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Everyone be safe.